Um, Hello and welcome to our seventh annual Exploring Indiana webinar. My name is Brian Dickinson and I'm the Donor Relations Manager here for the Nature Conservancy, calling in from our office in downtown Indianapolis. I want to thank you all for joining today as we have a special slate of speakers that will certainly leave you wanting much, much more. We'd love to see where everyone's tuning in from. So in the chat, please share where you're located. I imagine some of you may be tuning in from the Bloomington area, and I'd be remiss to not give a big shout out to my alma mater, the college football national champions, the Indiana Hoosiers, and rep their newly introduced Bison mascot. Go Hoosiers. Like IU now officially being more than just a basketball school, TNC is much more than a land protection agency, and you'll learn more why today. Back to business. I'm going to go over some brief housekeeping items to ensure things run smoothly for you at home. We've enabled closed captions for the webinar, so to turn them on, please click on the CC button on your Zoom toolbar. To select your caption language, please click the caret by the CC button to select your preferred language. Next, this webinar has both Q&A and chat features. We encourage you to use both. However, please refrain from using the chat function to ask questions. Instead, use it to express your thoughts throughout the program. Questions are highly encouraged, and if one crosses your mind, please use the Q&A feature. If someone asks a question that piques your interest, hit the up arrow so we can prioritize it. There will be time at the end of the hour to address as many questions as possible. I'm an avid moviegoer, so I highly recommend silencing your cell phone or putting it screen side down so you can fully immerse yourself in the Exploring Indiana experience. You won't want to miss what our expert staff have to share. On that note, that's all I have for you today. I'm honored to welcome TNC's Midwest Division Director, Michael Reuter. Michael has decades of experience at TNC across many functions and geographies, and we're really excited to have him batting leadoff today. Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning, everyone. And congrats to Indiana University. It was an amazing run. I want to thank all of you on the call, first off, just for being with us today and for your ongoing support of TNC and our mission. You know, I grew up just loving my time spent canoeing on Midwestern rivers and working on Midwestern farms. And so I feel really fortunate to have volunteered and worked with TNC for more than 3 decades now, focusing a lot on rivers and freshwater and agriculture over that time here in the Midwest and around the world. I came to be the Midwest Division Director about 9 years ago and began to work closely with my colleagues in Indiana and neighboring states to explore ways that we could build on our success and help TNC evolve to work more seamlessly at larger scales, thinking about systems like the Great Lakes, the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers, regenerative agriculture and clean energy, all of these that require teams that can work effectively across state lines. We're living in probably the most dynamic and challenging times that TNC has ever faced. And yet I believe that the collaborative and science-based organization that has been built at TNC was built in a way for this particular moment. And this is our moment. So we're asking ourselves, what is the organization we need to be right now to ensure that people and nature thrive? And who do we need to be as staff and volunteers to become that organization? And the leadership here today, the leadership in Indiana is just a big part of that answer. And our collaborative science-based approach, we feel it's really working. In 2025, last year, we worked with state agencies and local communities and indigenous nations to help improve management on 2.5 million acres in the Great Lakes. Our goals here in that system amount to about 30% of our global 2030 goal for improved lakes and rivers. It's amazing. And Indiana's work to restore wetlands in places like Grand Calumet is an important part of that work. The Midwest also led the organization on dam removal last year with over 2,500 river miles reconnected for fish and other riverine wildlife. And most of those river miles are in Indiana. network ties to our Kennebec River project in Maine recently announced, where TNC negotiated the purchase of 4 hydropower dams that will allow for their removal. Indiana also plays just a key role globally. I am actually just stepping out here for a few minutes from a meeting in Boulder, Colorado with our North America agriculture team. Indiana and the Midwest played just a pivotal role in establishing this work at TNC, which is now advancing regenerative agricultural practices from the US to Canada to Brazil to India and more. Now, that work was led often and most times by Larry Clemens, who's just been a very close colleague and friend to me for more than 30 years. And his retirement this past year was, a much deserved celebration of his achievements, however, kind of bittersweet to us personally. But I'm also just really thrilled to see Cassie coming into this role. She just impresses me with her depth of thinking on so many issues. I value her long experience on collaborative system scale approaches to conservation, and I just appreciate the ways that she has worked so closely with many different partners and communities over her many years at TNC. So as I said, I'm feeling like TNC was built for this moment. And with Cassie and the Indiana team, including a strong Indiana Board of Trustees, we have the right people in the right place at the right time to have a big impact on our mission in the coming years. So thank you for being here. Over to you, Cassie.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for the opportunity today to share a little bit with you about the work that we've been able to accomplish in 2025. And 2025 was a big year for me too. I joined the Nature Conservancy in 2000 in my hometown of Corydon, Indiana, as Blue River Conservation Coordinator. And you see Blue River here in the background. And at that time, we were launching community-based conservation, where we were trying to work, very, very closely with community and with people from that community. So I came in and I appreciated the Blue River. I knew about it. I had recreated there, but had no idea of the biodiversity that this river holds. And so from hellbender salamanders to federally endangered plants like Short's goldenrod and Indiana bat haven, it really formed my formative years of understanding biodiversity. And that's something I love about this organization, is that's our North Star always, is how to promote biodiversity, and the how is really the fun part, and also how to think about these systems adapting to a changing climate and species being able to move. And so in the Midwest, that's important from a number of perspectives, and you're going to hear some of those today. But I wanted to share that I remember the first time someone at the Nature Conservancy suggested to me that I could be the next state director in Indiana. And of course, that stuck with me. I remember exactly the place where I was when that was said. And I kind of, blew it off, but also I remember it. And here we are. And I'm very honored to be here. And this is important to me because people invested in me, and I remember that, and I appreciate that. And my trajectory at this organization has been built on the work of a lot of people who were great leaders and invested. And it's important to me to invest in the next generation of conservation leaders. And you're going to hear from some of those people today on this call. They're going to, be highlighting the different approaches that we take, some of the how of conservation, from straight out protection of land, but really thinking bigger, thinking at a landscape scale about how we connect these places. How do we connect the Great Lakes to the Ohio River through the Wabash River system and help species to move? Wildlife corridors is something that I'm really excited about, as we're starting to think about how to move animals, through landscapes of working lands, which the Midwest is. So you're going to hear from some of these people, and I'm excited to get started today. So if we can have the agenda, we'll do a real quick overview. So we're going to hear from our board chair, Jane Stouts, about 25 and some of the highlights there. And then we'll dive a little bit deeper, looking at Douglas Woods, which is in Northeast Indiana around Fish Creek, one of our first community-based conservation program. We're going to talk about fresh water from the perspective of agriculture and things we're doing there to promote the species that live in the Wabash River and live in the Gulf of Mexico and our world's oceans, and how we deliver better water. And we're going to hear a story about family farms and forests in our Forest Bank program. When I started, we were enrolling our first Forest Bank enrollment back in 2000. And here we are 25 years later. And that program is nearing 10,000 acres of enrolled land, and I'm excited about that. And we're going to end on some water policy in Indiana and sort of the state of play with John Ketzenberger, and we'll have a little time for Q&A. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jane.
Well, thanks, Cassie. Good afternoon. My name is Jane Stouts, and I serve as chair of the Board of Trustees of the Indiana chapter of the Nature Conservancy. And it's truly a privilege to work with this wonderful group of volunteers and all the staff and supporters of TNC, or not only around the state, but around the Midwest and even globally. I'm often asked why TNC, and I've had the opportunity over the past 2 decades to see TNC's work firsthand, from restoring prairies to forest and wetlands to promoting regenerative agriculture, something that I'm passionate about. You can see our family farm pictured in the background there, and connecting communities with nature. So it's not only what TNC does, but it's also how they go about doing the important work. TNC is rooted in partnership, science, and community. So it's my privilege to share a few highlights of the Nature Conservancy's important work here in Indiana from the past year. It's challenging to pick just a few. I ask that if you have a favorite highlight of the year, please feel free to share that in the chat. We had over 25 media outlets covering our work, including not only the Indianapolis Star, the Indianapolis Recorder that we have a wonderful relationship with, the Indianapolis Business Journal, things like Northwest Indiana Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, and so many more. So a few of our highlights as they appear on the screen. One that I do want to call out is the passage of a new law that expands Indiana's prescribed fire capacity. And it also facilitates private landowners to use this important tool really to help manage their property and improve habitat. So thank you to John and all of the folks from a policy perspective that helped make that happen, and our on-the-ground fire management team as well. We also had the expansion of the Indiana Regenerative Agriculture Demonstration Network, where TNC helps install conservation drainage and edge of field practices. We'll hear more about that from Danielle later. We had the longstanding collaborations along the lower Wabash River continue to expand that helped integrate floodplain restoration and landowner partnership to reduce flood risk, boost water quality, and create critical habitat. A couple key acquisitions that I wanted to highlight include the 83-acre expansion of Greens Bluff Nature Preserve in Owen County. This really helps protect the forest there and the water quality in nearby Raccoon Creek, as well as keep larger swaths of forest intact for migratory songbirds. So key acquisition there. And then we'll be hearing more about the 265-acre acquisition to expand Douglas Woods Nature Preserve in Steuben County, which again helps protect Fish Creek, which is one of the most biologically diverse streams in the Great Lakes region. So we'll hear more about that. And finally, just excited about the year ahead and the incredible opportunities to advance TNC's conservation priorities with your continued support. And that's staff, that's volunteers, that's donors, community partners. I just really want to thank you. And as I turn it back to Cassie, who as our new state director and Midwest partner brings such a wealth of knowledge and passion for our work. I first got to know Cassie when she was the Blue River Conservation Coordinator, protecting freshwater mussels and the hellbender salamander. As part of the search committee, had the opportunity to really hear about her insight, her passion, her goals for the organization. And I can say the organization is in good hands as she helps lead us forward. So, Cassie, back to you.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate that. So now we're gonna zoom up to Northeast Indiana, an area of wetlands and lots of water. This area drains to Lake Erie, so it's sort of the highest point in the watershed. And I first knew about this place in 2000 when I joined the Nature Conservancy, because Fish Creek and the Blue River were sort of parallel projects, but very, very different landscape than what I was used to. There aren't nearly as many hills, but an inch of difference makes a huge difference in terms of storing water here. And so Fish Creek is really important to us because of those freshwater mussels. I am a freshwater ecologist, and so freshwater mussels are my jam. And so I love any chance I get to have a mask and snorkel down in Fish Creek. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nathan to share about some exciting news there. And then he'll turn it over to Melissa to hear about improvements that we're making to welcome you to Douglas Woods. Nathan?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nathan Herbert. I'm the land manager for TNC's preserves up here in Northeast Indiana. And so Melissa and I are going to talk about some acquisitions at Douglas Woods, and then also a lot of visitor improvements that are going on this spring and into the summer. On the next slide, we see sort of a map of Douglas Woods in green. And Douglas Woods is our largest preserve in this part of the state. It's pretty much composed of two big blocks of land. We have Douglas Woods North at the top of the map there, purchased in 2009. And we have Douglas Woods South, which was originally the original acquisition in 1993. And then we've been building out since with that. The big conservation targets at Douglas Woods are high quality, mature forest in Douglas Woods South, and then also Fish Creek, as Cassie mentioned, which is that band of blue that sort of runs from the top of the slide and winds its way down through the preserve and exits out the bottom of the slide. On the next slide, we can see some the work that we're doing at Douglas Woods, and we've been doing since 1993. Now, on the left side is one of the remnant ephemeral wetlands at Douglas Woods. This is sort of our conservation ideal when we talk about wetland restoration. These wetlands are a really key component to the forests in northern Indiana. And Douglas Woods has a nice complex of pretty much undisturbed wetlands in the middle of it. That's in Douglas Woods South. And then on the right side of the slide is an overview of Douglas Woods North, looking to the west. And that's a really large family farm that we purchased in 2009. And we reforested it with almost 400,000 trees. That's an active restoration. And then we also put more than 100 acres of wetland restoration on the ground with Douglas Woods North. So since 1993, with the original purpose of Douglas Woods, we've been working to build it out, to reforest more land, and also to protect more of the land around Fish Creek. Now, the next slide shows one of the inspirations for our management practices up here at Douglas Woods. And it's going to sound a little weird, but it's all about a snake for me. So the copper-bellied water snake is sort of the inspiration. Its ecology directs our management strategy for the land up here. The snake requires large chunks of forested and relatively undisturbed land with lots of little wetlands and wetland complexes that it can move around in across the landscape. It requires interconnectivity. And so as we put forest back on the ground up here, as we build more wetlands and we build things out to interconnect things, we're providing for the ecology of the snake, but pretty much everything else that's native to this part of the state as well. On the next slide, we'll see the other major conservation target, which is affected by our land protection, which is, of course, Fish Creek. Photo here by Ron Leonetti. And Fish Creek is a major feature of the preserve. It's a high-quality stream, one of the highest quality streams in the Great Lakes Basin, home to more than 25 or 26 over that species of freshwater mussels, including 5 species that are federally protected, federally endangered, including the clubshell that we see on the right side of the slide. And that clubshell was found in sections of the stream that are protected by TNC. Now, the big news up here in terms of habitat on the next slide is the acquisition of an additional 265, a little bit over acres that's directly connected to Douglas Woods North. This additional 265 acres not only increases the amount of land along Fish Creek the TNC is protecting, it also expands our opportunities for habitat restoration, and it almost connects Douglas Woods north and south. On the left side of the slide is sort of a recent aerial image, just showing the on the ground conditions. And on the final slide, we see some photos that I took last week, actually, of what the habitat is like right now in this new acquisition. And so it's sort of a mixture of riparian corridor, stream corridor along Fish Creek, forest, upland forest, in certain areas, and then a lot of it is old field and agriculture. And so it's really pretty much just like all the other big tracts of land we've purchased up here. And our job and I'm really looking forward to doing it over the next, 5, 6, 7 years, getting started on really in earnest the restoration work, putting more forest on the ground and reestablishing the hydrology, putting wetlands back on the ground on this site as well. I'm going to hand it over to Melissa, who's going to talk about the visitor improvements at Douglas Woods South.
Thank you, Nathan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Moran. I'm the Director of Community Programs, and among the fun things I get to do is think about how to welcome more visitors to see the amazing work of folks like Nathan on our properties. Douglas Woods is one of 7 locations that we consider flagship preserves, which means it's a location that has an amazing conservation story, in this case, forest and wetland restoration, and the property has the capacity for visitors that can be balanced with its ecological needs. In other words, these are not overly sensitive sites. At the flagship preserves, we want to make these improvements so that visitors will feel more welcome as they approach our sites. In this picture, this was a gathering we had last summer. If you look past the people across the existing gravel parking area, you'll notice this collection of 4 signs that have a little bit of information on them that might guide or inform someone who's familiar with visiting nature preserves, yet it falls short of welcoming new people or people who need assistance with accessibility. So we undertook a process of community input as we wanted to consider making these improvements. And the timeline begins in 2022. If you look, I'll highlight just the red text here that indicate when we were soliciting and inviting community input. In 2022, in November, we had an open house that was essentially a listening session to find out what people know about Douglas Woods, how they might like to participate or engage there. That led to a February design charrette, which was brainstorming to figure out what improvements we might make in 2023. And then in the fall of 2023, we had a concept review meeting with the community members. You see a photo here on this slide. And people could look at the images that resulted from their ideas and provide us further input. This past summer in June, there was a preview of the visitor improvements because the trail portion of the work was complete. And we hope this fall, September, October, that the construction of the remaining improvements will be complete and that you can join us at that point in time. Zooming in a little bit, we're focused on improvements here at Douglas South. So this is the same map you saw from Nathan. And we are looking at improvements coming off of the road to the south, adding a new parking area and a trail. If we look at the image on the right, that's the aerial photo, there is a 2-mile trail. Can advance to the next slide. 2-mile trail that goes through wetlands, mature forest, and tree plantation. That trail was built last year by enthusiastic crew from American Conservation Experience, shown here in the image on the left with their Nature Conservancy t-shirts. Behind them, you will see a sign marking Douglas Woods that's a little worn out. It's difficult to read from the road, and that's one of the things we want to replace so that as people drive by, it's clear that this is a property that we want people to stop by and visit. Zooming in on the parking area, we have 2 accessible parking places. and a clear area, the little circular area in the inset, that is kind of a gathering or a welcoming area where people can meet up, they can read the signs to learn about the restoration work at Douglas Woods, have a seat. And from there, they'll embark upon the beginning of the trail, and the first 1/10 of a mile of this trail is accessible. It's compacted gravel. As that trail continues north, there are 2 overlooks into the very first wetland that is nearest the parking lot, and those accessible viewing platforms are featured so that people can enjoy the wetland. So here's a photo of the American Conservation Experience crew working on building out the base of that trail, the alignment of that trail last spring. And the improvement that's coming will bring 2 viewing platforms that have benches. People can sit and enjoy the view of the wetland and on a clear day, hopefully see the sunrise. So we're very excited. The construction contractor is close to being selected. Their work will begin this spring, and we invite you all to come this fall and get to know Douglas Woods.
Thank you, Melissa and Nathan. Great things happening at Douglas Woods as we speak. So now we're going to transition over to Freshwater Wonders. And Sarah Riley and Danielle are going to talk about our agriculture work. And this is important for a few reasons. One, we want Indiana's acres to be very productive so that we avoid conversion of land elsewhere on our globe to agricultural purposes. And we also care about the things that are right in our backyard. So we want clean drinking water and we want good habitat for the fish and mussels and all the things that live in our amazing river systems in Indiana. We really are blessed with some unique places, and these people are doing some amazing work to help make those things better. So with that, I'll kick it off to you, Sarah. Sarah, you're on mute.
I knew I'd do that. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Riley and I am the White River Project Director here on the freshwater team, which means I cover both the East Fork and the West Fork of the White River Basin. They are shown on the map. But we're going to zoom out a little bit to the entire Mississippi River Basin and then focus a little bit on the Wabash River watershed, which is that black outline there in the middle. You'll see kind of to the middle right of that, the really dark red color, that's the White River watershed we were just looking at. So that Wabash River watershed in black contributes anywhere from 1 to 7% of the flow in any given year, and that's going to depend on snowfall, rainfall, and things like that. But 11 to 17% of the nutrients that are then going to flow down to the Gulf and contribute to the hypoxic zone. So phosphorus and nitrite, things like that. So on the freshwater team, we have a couple different mechanisms that we can use to combat this. And if we're talking about freshwater in Indiana, like Cassie mentioned, we're probably focusing on agriculture because that's over 60% of our land base here in the state. So I'm going to share a little bit about our partnerships as well as our cost share programs. So one of the tools that we can use is a cost share program, which allows farmers to implement conservation practices on their farm without having to pay the whole amount upfront because these things tend to be very expensive. We have 2 active national water quality initiatives, which are shown there on the map. These outreach items are from the Muncie Creek and Headwaters watershed. So we've got a billboard that I worked on with the marketing team, some online ads, and then we were even able to turn those billboards into those cool pouches you see there that we hand out at events where people can use the QR code and then check out the project website to learn more about how to get these conservation practices implemented on their farms. Now, we don't just send out cool postcards, we also do events. So in December, last winter, on the next slide, I have some photos of our Harvest for Healthy Waters event. So I worked with a local soil and water conservation district in the watershed and the landowner pictured there on the left to bring some folks out to his farm, about 10, which was a good group for December. It was a beautiful day. We were able to talk about the conservation practices he's implemented on his farm that butts right up to the tributary to the White River you see there in the middle. And we concluded this event with pie and soup and some really great chats in his shop, which was absolutely excellent. Now, one other thing that that makes these projects successful is our partnerships. We cannot do this work without partnerships. This is not an exclusive list by any means, just an example of some of the folks that we work with to make these successful. Ultimately, we're hoping to work ourselves out of these watersheds by having such great water quality that we don't need to be there anymore, but we do want to set our local partners up for success to make these continuity. So having that continuance even after we're not there and supporting those conservation practices is important. And one way we're doing that is through a partnership with Premier Ag. So they are in the red portion of Indiana right there. So we've actually partnered with them to install a conservation agronomist at their location. So when farmers come in to purchase things like fertilizer or other supplies, they can then chat with the conservation agronomist who sets them up with cost share opportunities like I spoke of, or even just suggest conservation practices that might be a good fit for their farm, and then lets them know how they can do that as well. So kind of a one-stop shop instead of splitting things out. So now I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, who's going to talk a little more specifically about our edge of field practices.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Randalls, and I'm Indiana's Regenerative Agriculture Manager. My work here in Indiana is focused on the Indiana Regenerative Agriculture Demonstration Network. It's a collection of farms showcasing edge-of-field practices. This includes saturated buffers, denitrifying bioreactors, drainage water management, phosphorus traps, and more. These are practices that connect to the existing tile drainage system that are on Indiana's farms, and those help to remove excess water from the fields. These practices that I'm showcasing aren't common in Indiana yet, but we're working on changing that. All of this work really began at Fairholme Farms, which is in east central Indiana along the Henry-Rush County line. The team we work with there consists of the landowner, agronomist, and father and son farmers that have relationships spanning over 40 years. Fairholme is our showcase farm with in-field and edge-of-field conservation practices across their entire operation. This really inspired us to create a network, a way to make these practices visible and accessible to farmers, landowners, conservation professionals, and more, in hopes of increasing the adoption of those conservation practices. Right now, the network consists of 5 farms, hopefully adding another one soon, and they're led by conservation-minded farmers that are heavily involved in their communities, which makes them the perfect advocate for this conservation work. The farms span across the state. This connects our Midwest work, which is happening from Ohio to Illinois and beyond, where we're all trying to install edge-of-field practices and a landscape approach. The conservation practices that we're implementing reduce that nitrate and phosphorus that Sarah was mentioning. Those nutrients can come off of farm fields and reduce water quality in Indiana and all the way to the Gulf. So we have these specific practices that are really special because they're helping to reduce this using automated technology, which saves farmers on labor and having to go out to the field to make any adjustments to them. Compared to the older manual style structures, these are a huge win. They also capture important data that's easily accessible online, and as a bonus, they're solar powered. In 2026, we're looking forward to adding more farms to this network, adding nitrate sensors that will take measurements multiple times an hour and we'll be able to see those results online. And we're going to continue to host many events with familiar faces and new faces. If you'd like to see one of these structures, but you don't get out to a farm very often, we really encourage you to stop by the State Fair in August. At the Pathway to Water Quality, which is managed by the Indiana Conservation Partnership, it'll be our second year having a custom structure set up that's see-through, giving you the really special opportunity to see what's usually hidden below ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and Danielle. Some great work there. And I think you all heard partnerships. I wasn't counting, but we heard it a number of times. And that's how we get our work done in Indiana and as the Nature Conservancy. It's always in partnership and it's always with people. The next little story that you're going to hear is about forests and families and farms and a person and a family. And I am, struck with we protected 10,000 acres between 2020 and 2025. And now between 2025 and 2030, we want to protect an additional 10,000. And it's stories like this that get us there. And it's really fulfilling work to be able to work in this way on private lands and with private landowners to protect some of the best examples of what Indiana has to offer. So I'll turn it over now to Chris Neggers. He's our Director of Forest Conservation to tell us about a farm in Union County. One of the coldest days of my career at the Nature Conservancy was spent at this farm. So I definitely have some fond memories of this place. So Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Cassie. And yes, some of the coldest days of my career have also been spent on this particular farm. But good afternoon, everyone. My name's Chris, and I wanted to tell you a story about a place that we get to work on in Union County. And the photo here on my title slide is taken in the woods on this particular property. And if we can advance to the next slide, where I wanted to start was by introducing you to the person that helped connect us with this property. And this is Charlie. And Charlie is the third generation to have grown up on the family farm. And his parents and grandparents worked the land and grew crops and raised their families there. But Charlie moved away, had a life and a career, and raised a family elsewhere. But the family farm remained a special place to him, with families gathering for holidays, with Thanksgiving and Easter being the two big ones. And they would be there for, fellowship and traditions and to see each other and be part of something. And Charlie was able to become the owner of this farm later in his life. And as he put it, he felt like the dog who had caught the car and was trying to figure out what was next, because the next generation wasn't as connected to the family farm as he was, yet it remained a special place to him, and he wanted to protect the place and the legacy and the memories that they had there. So, through a connection with one of our trustees, he began talking with the Nature Conservancy about what is possible to permanently protect this land. And we got to know Charlie and understand what was important to him and some of the history on this land, and explain what we could do. And we have the Forest Bank, which is a working forest program, which does conservation forest management that can generate income. And that money is then used to support the conservation work we do here. And when we accept a donation like this, it really helps support us and the work we do here. And while talking with Charlie about the history out here and hearing of family gatherings with too many people in a very small house and how they would need a break and want to get outside on the land, they would go through for a walk down the lane into the woods to the big creek, which felt strangely familiar because my family does the same thing at my family homeland in Massachusetts. Small house, too many people, you need to get outside. And we walk down the same lane and look at the same trees that I have for my entire life. So Charlie was explaining this, and I felt connected. It all felt familiar. I could imagine these family walks, and could understand, some of the special moments that happened out there. So it was a great privilege to become the next owner of the forest land here in this photo. And in the foreground, you can see the farmhouse and the fields behind it. And this forest has a large creek called Indian Creek, which flows through it and goes to the east into Ohio and is part of the Great Miami River Basin. And shortly after we began working on this property, discovered that it was not without some problems. It had invasive shrubs that needed to be taken care of, and I quickly discovered emerald ash borer, which is an invasive insect that kills ash trees. So it was clear that we needed to do some hard work and make some bittersweet choices for the health and the future of this forest. So we did a salvage timber harvest, to try and slow the spread of that invasive insect and do the right thing to help this forest grow and thrive in the future. And we've invested in controlling the invasive shrubs as well. And if we can go to the next slide. Here's another place on this farm, a different kind of forest. And this was a field in a bottom along Indian Creek, which Charlie would say was the best soil on the whole farm because it was a floodplain near the creek and deep, rich, fertile soils. I don't think he'd be embarrassed to tell you that this was also a field that was a pain in the butt to work in because the road that came down the hill to it was narrow. It would wash out. You couldn't get trucks into it. It's hard to get the combines in, and dragging the tractor and the grain cart out was always a challenge. So he made the choice to partner with Purdue University to plant these trees. And these trees are special. They are butternut trees. And butternut is a cousin to walnut, but butternut is being affected by a fungus and they're dying in the wild. But the trees that produce these seeds are surviving in the wild. So they collected these seeds and planted them out to see if there was a resistance gene. And if there is, those could be used to grow healthy butternuts that can survive and thrive into the future. And this is just one example of a familiar story to us all about change and adaptation and disturbance and recovery. And a thing is not healthy because it doesn't change. A thing is healthy because it's so adapted to disturbance that it cannot be broken. And it's the resilience of the people and places that we get to work on that tell this story that really give me joy to work here. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I really can't top that. That was beautiful. And I love that adapting to change, and we have to be resilient. And that's exactly what we're doing, is trying to build resilience into systems. So that's a good transition, I think, into policy in Indiana, and how to build resilience into our state's policy as relates to the environment, and in particular water, and how water really flows through and informs a lot of conservation in Indiana. So with that, I'll turn it over to probably a familiar name to many of you, John Ketzenberger, our Director of Government Relations. John?
Cassie, thanks a lot, and greetings to all of our TNC supporters today. I am John Ketzenberger, and it's my privilege to represent the Nature Conservancy's Indiana chapter to our elected officials. Our conservation staff makes sure I am armed with good stories of great conservation, like you just heard, and we advocate for common sense policies to ensure that our goals are met. The prescribed fire bill that Jane mentioned earlier about last year is an example of that, and I'm happy to say that Chris and my other colleague Stuart Orr both testified in favor of that bill and were critical in making sure that that happened. But today I'm going to focus on water. 2 years ago, we determined that water was a critical issue ripe for good public policy consideration. Climate change, the plan to pump 100 million gallons of water from West Lafayette to Lebanon, and now the proliferation of data centers all present threats to Hoosiers who must have access to the Earth's most precious resource. I think the photo you saw earlier of the Salamone River near LeGros represents the challenge that we face. It's a little murky, it's hard to discern, and it's a little like working in the policy arena. Now, the river also represents the bounty of water that Indiana enjoys, a bounty that will become even more important as climate change shifts demography and Americans rediscover how hospitable the Midwest is for living, working, and thriving. But Indiana is not ready for that economic development projects being proposed, much less additional population. I'm sorry to say that we have no water policy in Indiana. The only requirement is that users who pull more than 100,000 gallons of water a day from the aquifers beneath us must report that to the Department of Natural Resources. And that's it. Really. That's why we believe it's important to help the state enact sensible water regulations to meet current and future needs and this important goal: access to plentiful and clean water for all Hoosiers. The last few years have not helped. 4 years ago, the General Assembly removed protection from most of the state's remaining wetlands. A year later, it took much of what was left, and last year, the Supreme Court of the United States, in its Sackett ruling, further diminished protection of wetlands and water resources. And now the data center projects that are moving across the state, especially in northern Indiana, pose a significant challenge to the state's water supply. We're working to mitigate the effects of these data centers through time-tested methods in regenerative ag and forestry, while our colleagues across North America are working with us to develop new approaches and our response to making sure that that water is available, not just to the data centers, but again, to everyone else. Next slide, Brian. Last March, Governor Mike Braun introduced Executive Order 2563, and I'm happy to say many of its provisions look familiar. The governor created a task force led by the DNR's water director, Ryan Miller, who led a similar task force in Missouri a few years ago. The task force was charged with studying the state's water resources, determining its capacity, and then recommending ways to ensure its availability well into the future. Next slide, please. In November, TNC conducted in November of 2024, rather, TNC conducted a statewide scientific survey to understand what Hoosiers know about water and what they think the state should do to protect it. This was part of our foundational work that led to the task force's creation. Bellwether Research surveyed 800 registered voters in the state, and the political and demographic breakdown mirrored our population. A whopping 95% believe that water is a public resource that should be protected, and 82% favor comprehensive state policy to manage those water resources. 8 in 10 Hoosiers said protecting water and other natural resources is important to their voting decisions. We began meeting with the DNR and Mr. Miller in April and have committed significant funds to help the task force do its work. We've committed to conducting an updated water survey to confirm our findings and test questions the task force wants answered from the public. This is important because data center projects were largely unknown during the last survey 18 months ago. We're also sponsoring a series of listening sessions that begin on February 12th at Fort Harrison in Indianapolis and run through April at locations across the state. And finally, we're also helping the state to fund a water flow study for the entire state that will help us understand what the total capacity for the Indiana is and where it's located. All of this keeps TNC engaged in the task force, and we hope to guide any proposals toward our 3 basic pillars: adequate and clean water for all Hoosiers. And quickly, as Cassie mentioned, we're working with the governor to develop a program to create tree-planted buffers, a so-called edge-of-field practice along the Wabash River. We've engaged with the Indiana Department of Agriculture to enhance the regenerative ag work that you heard about earlier. And we've secured support for formation of the Ohio River Basin Restoration Act, which would ensure federal funding for improving the river. It's similar to the legislation that created the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which helps pay for some of our work along Lake Michigan. Congresswoman Erin Houchin in Southeast Indiana is a co-sponsor of that bill with her Democratic counterpart, Representative Morgan McGarvey of Kentucky. I'm happy to say that Representative Mark Messmer, who represents Southwest Indiana, has signed on to the bill, which will help ensure our extensive work along the river will continue. And I just have to finish by saying I am certainly grateful for this opportunity to lobby for nature and to represent the Nature Conservancy in the halls of power. And I really appreciate your support of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Great recap. And I will say that, when you maybe first start out in conservation, policy isn't the first place you land on what needs to be done, but boy, does it sure create enabling conditions for good conservation to happen. And so it's vital to our work, excuse me, and it's been really fun to navigate the political jungle with John, leading us there. So with that, I will turn it over to Chip Sutton to handle our question and answer session. We've got, I think, about 8 to 10 minutes here for a question and answer session. So Chip, over to you.
Thanks, Cassie. The first questions are about Melissa and Nathan's Douglas Woods presentation. Nathan, the question I'm posing to you is, does the new addition to Douglas Woods cover both sides, both banks of Fish Creek, or does it abut just one bank?
There are portions that are on either side of Fish Creek, and then the south side of the new acquisition is covering the north side of Fish Creek. Interestingly, that parcel to the south went up for auction a few years ago. The final price was pretty outrageous, but I would say not necessarily a conservation buyer, but the person that ended up with the land actually is a supporter of TNC. I spoke to them after the auction, and they have no intention to do anything with the property. They simply bought it to have a nice place, to have a nice forest basically attached to their existing property.
Great. Melissa Moran, for you, concerning Douglas Woods, will the new signage at Douglas Woods include Indigenous history or other languages?
I love this question. Thank you to the questioner. Before we built the trail at Douglas Woods, the Nature Conservancy undertook a cultural resources assessment to understand if there were any significant cultural resources on the site. And before we built the trail, the consultant was able to confirm that there wasn't anything that would prevent us from aligning the trail in the way that we had proposed. So we've proceeded with that. The results of that study, we asked the consultant to include information for us about the history of the area, and if that information arrives in time, we will be including that on the sign. We also will be including a land acknowledgement that acknowledges the tribal people, the tribal nations who consider the area of Douglas Woods part of their homeland.
Great. Nathan, back to you. Will the new Douglas Woods property be open to the public?
Yeah, the Douglas Woods in its entirety is open to the public. The new one will be open to the public. I guess it's open now if somebody wanted to walk it. It's so new that I haven't posted the boundaries yet. Um, but if someone wanted to go take a look at it, they're welcome right now.
Great. I'm going to interject and make a shameless plug for a new Travel Stories audio tour, which we just created for our Kankakee Sands Preserve in northwestern Indiana. And I say this because Nathan Herbert narrated the audio tour. So when you'll be seeing more about that in the coming weeks, but just be on the lookout for that. All right, Cassie, to you, someone in the chat section said, our volunteers at Cummins have been asking, when can we support muscle tagging again in Columbus? I know muscle tagging is, you got that.
I'm guessing Scott Solom asked that question.
Maybe.
So, Scott, I don't know when we will have a project that can come to Columbus. As you recall, we were taking mussels at that time. We were growing them in Kentucky and then transporting them north in Indiana. We have supported the Muncie Bureau of Water Quality to build their own mussel rearing facility, so we don't have to transport mussels like we once did. And so they're doing a lot of that work now. So there are probably plenty of opportunities in Muncie. I don't know when the opportunities will present themselves in Columbus, but we can talk offline. And I love that you loved that program, because I did too.
Great. Sarah, this question is for you. Were your outreach campaigns in the two watersheds successful? Have you been able to gauge success?
Yeah, so in an area with historically low adoption of pretty much all conservation practices, we received 11 applications in just one county last year. And the district conservationist that receives those applications said that multiple people came into the office and asked specifically about the White River program or the White River funding, using some of the general language that we did about the program. And he was able to direct them to the right place and get them involved. So we've got 11 more applications there this year. So I'm really excited that we're getting some traction in that area and encouraging the conservation there.
Great. Danielle, we'll pivot to you. And can you explain more about regenerative drainage?
Sure. So drainage on the landscape right now is really focused on getting water off the land quickly. But with some of these practices that we're implementing, we're slowing down that water. We're keeping the water when we might need it during a drought, but then releasing it when there's too much. And this is through gates, but also just using the soil that's already there, allowing water to actually flow through the soil profile and have the denitrification happen on its own. So it's a really great combination of technology, but also using processes that already exist in order to get those results.
Great. Thank you. John Ketzenberger, what is TNC Indiana's position on data center development? Do we have a position on data center development?
Well, both questions in their variations are good questions. I will say that we are concerned about the impact on the environment that they may have. But at this point, just as with any other development kind of project, we expect that the relevant state and local, elected officials and the agencies that are involved, like the Department of Environmental Management, will conduct appropriate and transparent planning and review processes. So at this point, we do not support or oppose the development of those data centers, but as I mentioned during the presentation, we are very much involved in understanding what those data centers' impact will be, not just from a water standpoint, but also from an electricity standpoint, and then how we can ensure that their needs are met, but not at the expense of everything else. And so, while we don't have an official position on them, we are certainly working to ensure that they don't affect the environment as much as we have heard they may, and we'll continue to do that and stay on top of all of that going forward.
All righty. And John, there's this question. Are there ways that I can engage in policy?
Yeah,
What a
there are.
golden question. I love it.
Yeah, there are ways to engage in policy, and the best way is to pay attention to the things that we send out, and when there are situations that occur, like the wetlands bill that removed a lot of the protections 4 years ago, is to use your voice. We can help in ways that give you information, maybe even some template language, and direct you to whom to contact. But really, we count on the public to amplify our messages, and that's what we really count on and need going forward. Because all of the personal politics aside that we hear about going forward, our legislators want to know what the public thinks. And unless we tell them, they're going to make their own conclusions. And so it's up to us to do that. And that is the best way to engage with folks, is to use your voice, taking the information that we share with you and going forward.
Great. Thank you. Cassie, someone asks, what's some big stuff on the horizon for land protection in 2026?
Oh, great question. We try very hard not to talk much about our land protection deals until they happen. Never count your never count your chickens before they hatch, I think, is the term. And so there are some big things in the hopper, but I don't feel like I can talk about those yet because I don't feel certain that they will happen. But I hope next year at this time that we have a really big deal to talk with you about. Land protection takes a long time. You heard a lot about Douglas Woods today. There are more opportunities there as well. And I would be remiss not to share that we have a matching opportunity right now to fund the acquisition of that big buck property. So up to $500,000, your gift will be matched to that. So consider that to help us do some more. I think we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and close this up. So following today, we'll follow up, with a little bit more information. But I would just ask you sign up for, our newsletter. Look at, like us on social media. Of course, donate. We always are happy to take donations for any and all of the work that you've heard today and so much more. There also are opportunities to volunteer. All of these things you can find on our website. We will send links when we follow up with you. Appreciate you joining us today and just the support that you give us and letting us share your lunch hour to talk about some of the things that we're most proud of in 2025. Thank you. I'll see you next year.